I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because everything got loud. Every voice trying to win the moment. Nobody listening to the ground. I wanted space, not distance from reality. Distance from the noise, pretending to be reality. I stepped off the treadmill, left the shouting behind. No flashing banners in my head, just space to think and time. They sell you urgency, they sell you fear. Every voice is louder, but nothing's clear. I don't listen to what's promised, I watch what happens. I don't follow tone, I follow patterns. No borrowed fear, no rented rage, just facts moving across the page. What to build, choices form. Watch who bends, watch who storms. Signals matter, noise is cheap. What they say versus what they keep. This is Sane in Colombia, where the volume comes down. No talking points, no marching sound. I don't chase the noise, I don't rent my mind. I step back far enough to see the design. Coffee on the table, mountains in the frame. Thinking for myself, that's how I stay sane. Living sane in Colombia. Sane in Colombia. Sane in Colombia.
So welcome back to the channel, Sane in Colombia. That's my personal channel. Even though I got a coffee time sign up there, it's still a work in progress. Lighting and everything, it's going to be off. Doesn't matter. We're here to talk about more important things. And first, brought to you by book number 3. And how did I get 3 books out so quick? They're all the same. Should I? All right. Book number 1 came from stuff that I've been working on for a very long time, going back a couple years as far as putting something on paper. Prior to that, just thoughts. Book number 1 is a nonfiction book. And the theme, I don't want to go into the theme because it's all kind of a surprise, but I will say that the overriding theme is reoccurring civilizations. And so book number 1, lots of research and nonfiction, although almost every chapter has a thread at the end of the chapter of a story. But the book itself is essentially nonfiction. And then book number 2 is a novella, so it's not thick like the main book, and it's a different take on the same theme. And then book number 3 is yet another take on a similar theme. It's also a novella. The 2 novellas are rather short, and the nonfiction one's kind of long. They're all really in the same bucket. So you can read them independently, but it really hits right if you read the nonfiction to begin with and then the 2 novellas. All of these have been work in progress. I have a 4th one, but I'm not anywhere near as far into it as these have been, because it actually didn't even occur to me until I was working on the 3rd one to finish it up. And so it'll probably be maybe the middle of the year or the end of this year before that one takes form. And the last one I'm working on, that I've been working on for a decade, is essentially my life story, autobiography. I have particular reasons to want to do it. And so it's pretty far along. It's mostly written, but it's so disorganized. The organization's killing me. It's just very complicated. So anyway, you can find on Amazon. Got a little blurb about the author on there. So today, what am I going to do on my personal channel? We're going to talk about Trump because his outrageous claim about taking over Greenland is all in the news again. And it's like different chapter, same story, kind of. So that's what I want to talk about today. I contend that there's nothing unusual about it. We just haven't seen it for a while. And I will also contend that the past president, that's very similar to Trump, or Trump is very similar to this past president, in my opinion, is Teddy Roosevelt. Very much alike. The way they operate, the outlandish things they'd say, the possible threats, all the same thing. All right, so let's get what I want to talk about today. And it's something that keeps getting misunderstood, especially by people who focus on tone instead of results. When Donald Trump speaks, a lot of people hear chaos, exaggeration, or bravado. Now, I'm not talking about the Trump deranged syndrome, which is a thing, and it's probably about 20% of the population. But I'm talking about Democrats, Republicans, independents that aren't over the cliff, don't think 24/7 about Trump and everything's got to be bad if it's got his name attached. There's some good, there's some bad, may not like him. That's really who I'm talking about. The 80% of Americans who are onlookers to what's happening. So these people hear chaos, exaggeration, and certainly bravado. What I hear is a negotiating pattern that used to be normal in American leadership, but quietly disappeared for decades. To understand it, you have to stop listening to individual statements and start watching the sequence. Trump doesn't operate line by line, he operates in arcs. Pressure builds, choices are presented, exits are left open, and consequences follow only when those exits are ignored. Once behavior changes, the pressure is off and the noise drops. That structure matters because for about 50 years, American foreign policy drifted into a habit of warning without consequence. Red lines were drawn, crossed over, redefined, eventually ignored. Over time, adversaries learned that patience was safer than compliance. Trump has reversed that lesson because we've been so complacent for so long that when he steps up and does what most American presidents have done in the past, it's jarring. But when Trump opens a negotiation, he starts off with a statement that sounds extreme. It's not carelessness, it's range setting. He resets the boundaries of what is being discussed so the negotiation starts on his terms rather than inside a narrow pre-approved box. You could see this clearly with NATO. Trump openly said that countries who failed to meet their defense obligations could not assume automatic American protection. Foundation of NATO, right? That language shocked diplomats and TV news commentators went ballistic. On the other hand, it produced results. Defense spending rose across the alliance. Long-standing commitments that had been ignored were finally honored. And once that happened, the alliance itself remained intact and functional. As a matter of fact, when it came to Ukraine, it became a procedure rather than an argument. Trade negotiations followed the same rhythm. I mean, with China, Trump described the trade relationship in blunt terms, and imposed. I got pictures in my mind of things that he said. Stupid people. Those tariffs that he imposed were widely criticized at the time he put them on. I mean, think back just recently. Of course, he did it in the first term also. But these tariffs were not the end goal. They were all about the leverage. The pressure forced engagement. Intellectual property protections were addressed, and concrete commitments followed. Once movement occurred, his rhetoric softened and negotiations stabilized. The same thing happened back with NAFTA. Trump called it the worst trade deal ever made and openly discussed termination. You had people freaking out. To put it lightly, it unsettled markets. It certainly angered political elites. But the outcome was a modernized agreement that updated labor rules, digital trade, and enforcement mechanisms. And by all accounts, from Canada and Mexico, it was a superior agreement. The system didn't collapse. In fact, it was rebuilt. We're seeing it again now, where it's going to expire. And he was just asked, I think yesterday, what are we going to do about that? And he goes, well, I don't really care. They don't really have anything we want. So it doesn't matter to me whether we have an agreement or not. There we go again. That's opening salvo. I could care less. There'll be an agreement, but it'll be on the terms that he sets. This approach becomes even clearer when you look at adversarial states. Trump's rhetoric towards North Korea, I got a bigger button, was loud and unsettling. Words like fire and fury dominated the headlines. Behind all the noise was a simple structure. Pressure was applied publicly, consequences were stated plainly, but an exit was made visible. North Korea responded by engaging directly, something they never did. Missile testing paused during negotiations, and all through his first term, the testing stopped. The dynamic completely shifted. Iran followed a similar path recently. Trump withdrew from an agreement he believed lacked enforcement and applied sustained pressure. Red lines were stated clearly. When those lines were crossed, targeted action followed. After that, escalation stopped. The message was not endless conflict, it was conditional restraint tied to behavior. What's happening now isn't a result of that, it's a result of the inflation that's been taking place and the people are blown up. But as far as putting them in check, dropping a few bombs on their nuclear program certainly pulled them back from all the support they were giving financially to various groups in the Middle East. Now, of course, we got to talk about Venezuela, because Venezuela represents the enforcement phase of this pattern. Repeated exits were offered. Negotiations, elections, sanctions, even sanction relief were all on the table, but those options were ignored. When action finally came, it wasn't framed as impulsive or emotional. It was a law enforcement operation. It was framed as the predictable result of his refusal. From that point forward, warnings carried a different weight. The world was talking about it. Petro here in Colombia was talking about it. This is the psychological core of Trump's method. He's not trying to be liked, and he's succeeding, but he's trying to be believed. His tone is unpredictable, but his consequences aren't. Once that belief is established, fewer actions are needed because the example does the work. What makes us feel unfamiliar is not the strategy itself, it's the visibility. Earlier presidents used similar structures, but preferred private channels and quiet signaling. An example, I went back through and I looked at different presidents and different ways they reacted. And I had to put Nixon on the list because Nixon did a lot of things, but they weren't public. So he had very similar traits. He just kept it on the down low. The history supports what I'm saying. Theodore Roosevelt operated with the very same logic, making consequences legible and acting when ignored. Walk softly, carry a big stick. Franklin Roosevelt applied pressure through embargoes, inevitably while leaving exits formally open. World War II, Japan came as the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor came as a result of the fact that there was an embargo around Japan, a blockade. John Kennedy walked adversaries to the edge during the Cuban Missile Crisis and a couple other issues, even though he was only president a couple years. But he also provided a private path back. It was that technique that caused that crisis to fade away. And Nixon, he used the unpredictability to amplify credibility. What changed after the Cold War was not American power, but belief. I could have thrown in here, we've had two other presidents more recently. Clinton, like him or not, he certainly would apply, and Reagan. But the exact format used kind of goes back further. It really picks up with Kennedy. This is when warnings become rituals instead of signals. Trump restored consequence to the system. That's why his statements often sound shocking at first, but later it's inevitable. There was no other way. Seen through that lens, Trump is not an anomaly. He's a return to an older American negotiating posture. It was one built on clarity, choice, and follow through. Back when the country's word meant something. You don't have to admire the style to recognize how effective it is. You only have to watch what happens after the words are spoken. That's the pattern. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee it. A friend came over yesterday, had a cup of coffee on my new awesome machine. And I was talking a little bit about this. This was planned for about a week. I just haven't gotten around to it. But it's interesting because I got a little carried away and I told him, well, the United States has owned Greenland. We gave it to Denmark after World War II. He called me on it, and he was right to call me on it. We didn't technically legally own it. However, it was abandoned by Denmark. We took it over and set up a number of military bases. And after World War II, had we just stayed there, I mean, it was occupied, administered, protected. It was essentially ours, and we could have just continued with it. And there was talk about it, but the U.S. decided to turn it back over to Denmark. Denmark's chain of custody was broken because Denmark was invaded, and that government collapsed, and the Germans took over. And so that chain of custody with the legal government in Denmark was broken. And so that's when I was telling him that's really, I had done a lot of research on it and found all this information. And so, sometimes you'll shortcut something. Yeah, technically it wasn't really true, but the way reality is, it was true because legally the chain of custody had been broken. The very fact that we were there, we were in possession of it, it could have continued and nothing really would have it would have been understood at the time. But the goal of the United States back then was to restore everybody as much as possible to pre-war, including Germany and Japan. So if you're going to do it for Germany and Japan, how do you not do it for Denmark? So like everything else, nothing's as simple as maybe I tried to paint it. What we got here? Any question? I see we got a few viewers. Surprised because this is a surprise thing. I do it live, but it really is more for people who are going to watch it later. If you have any questions, feel free to ask now. Otherwise, I'll wrap it up for today. I've got another one on AI that's been written for a week and a half. I don't know when I'm going to do it. Tomorrow's a Bills game, so I'll probably watch that. Sunday's coffee time. So it'll either be later this afternoon or it'll be next week. All right. That's it. Thanks for checking in with me, and I'll see you at coffee time.
Yeah.